All right, I just finished watching John Alite's video about black empowerment, and for the most part, his video pretty much did the black empowerment angle as it pertained to the black gangs that are on the streets, and and Albanian mobsters and whatnot, and the whole crux of A Light's discussion was that the black gangs ain't as organized or structured like the Italian mob, and neither are the Albanian ones as well. Now, speaking of the Albanian organizations, I when I was going through John Alite's catalog, I thought I would see a video where John Alite was discussing particular Albanian mobster whose claim to fame was taking over an Italian gambling spot, and the Italians didn't do anything about that. And from my understanding, the Italians didn't want to do anything about it was because to do any act of violence would attract the ire of the FBI, and they didn't want to come under the scrutiny of the Fed, so they kind of treaded lightly as far as retaliation goes. So I just want to hear what he had to say about that whole affair. But for the most part, most of A Light's videos are slanted towards his firsthand accounts of him being on the street, along with interviews. So let's get back to the black empowerment topic. Now, after listening to what A Light had to say about the black empowerment topic, I wanted to expound on it, and I want to answer the questions that he had in regards to this particular subject. And it's quite clear why you don't really see black gangs structured, organized, or with any strong leadership or grooming process like the mob and everything. And I'm going to keep it on black gangs because I don't really know how the Albanian mob clan works. So I'm going to stay out of that. Now, as to why black gangs don't really have the same structure, leadership, codes, or guidelines like the Italian mob, it's very simple. First off, every time that you had black crime bosses attempt to organize, lead, or structure their groups similar to the Italian mob, they were met with quick and immediate opposition from the authorities. So they were shut down way before they could expand, really. And number two is, and I'm just going to come out and say it, I ain't going to come out and hide it and dance around the issue: racism. And I know some of you are going to feel a certain way about me saying it, but I don't care. Yes, there is, racism wasn't just limited to the legit world. Racism was prevalent in the illegit world. And I don't mean racism where somebody openly calls somebody a slur and whatnot. I mean racism as in, restrictions or limitations. Now, let me expound on this here. With the black gangs or the black side of organized crime, if you used to do a deep dive into them, you would notice that they were limited as far as what activities they could do or where they can conduct their activities. And for the most part, black gangsters were pretty much limited to the narcotics trade. Way, way, way back in the day, like my grandparents' day, they had the numbers and whatnot, and some of them even dabbled in the prostitution racket. But for the most part, in this day and age, it's all about narcotics. And it was all about narcotics to a point back then as well. But yeah, so in the underworld, you know, the only game in town that the blacks could play was narcotics. The Italians, on the other hand, they had the unions, they had the docks, they had their fingers in a whole bunch of different pies, and they could operate in different areas. They weren't limited just to Little Italy, they could be everywhere. The blacks, we could just only be in the ghetto, in the hood, which is why you see, most of the crimes you see with these black gangs are limited to their own neighborhoods. They're not allowed to grow and expand and ranch out, whatnot. And I know people could say, well, you know something? The Bloods and the Crips, they expanded. Not really, because there's not really no leadership or cohesion there. But for the most part, it comes down to two things. It comes down to eternal opposition, external opposition, and internal opposition. So it's a given you're gonna deal with the authorities when you're doing illicit activities like that. That's a given. But then on the flip side, you're dealing with eternal conflicts, like people wanting to be the number one person and everything. So when you had a lot of these black bosses that were taken off or removed from the board, and there wasn't any type of grooming process as far as leadership or no kind of rules or guidelines, guess what? When you had the local authorities or the feds that dismantled some of these operations and whatnot, a lot of these gangs disintegrated and became warring tribes. I mean, Larry Hoover, he ran the Gangster Disciples and whatnot, which he called Growth and Development. And Growth and Development's primary objective was to get into politics and make a difference in a political sector. And not only that, he wanted to get into the labor sector and provide jobs for his people and whatnot. But before he could really get any momentum or anything started with the growth and development thing, Larry Hoover was apprehended on more charges and resentenced to a ridiculous number in prison, where he's now in ADX, Colorado. And then you had Jeff Fort. Jeff Fort was the same like Larry Hoover. I mean, he wasn't, but I'm talking about he led a gang of maybe 1,500 or more so people and whatnot. But he's now in ADX, Florence. And you had Nicky Barnes, who ran the council and whatnot, and he had mentorship and guidance from Crazy Joe Gallo, who ran with the Colombo family. Gallo pretty much was instrumental in instructing Barnes that he should uniform his organization after the Italian mob. So when Nicky Barnes came home from prison, he did just that and whatnot, and it ran smoothly for a time up until Nicky Barnes was apprehended and he went to prison. Now, when he was in prison, the council pretty much fell apart, and they decided to do what they wanted to do. And when Nicky Barnes's interests weren't being met, he had no choice but to go to the feds and get his fellow council members up on charges and cooperate against them and have them locked up. And his time was reduced for his cooperation. He ended up getting a place in the witness protection, and I'll do a video on Nicky Barnes at some point. But The bottom line, what I want to say is there have been attempts at black gangs or black organized crime organizations to uniform or structure their groups in a similar fashion like the Italian mob. But you had internal conflicts and you had external conflicts at play here with that. Because every time a black gangster would, anytime they have any semblance of gaining momentum in their goals of objectives, they're stopped immediately from doing so. So it has been done, it has been attempted in the past, and every time people are close to achieving that, the feds come along and the operation is squashed. So that is why you don't really see that, really. I can't really speak to the black gangs of today because the black gangs of today are pretty much a byproduct of what happened years ago, of people that have attempted to organize and structure their particular organization like the Italian mob. And plus, when you once you removed these leaders off the board, whether it's by imprisonment or whether it's by the morgue or the graveyard, since there was no grooming process as far as leaders go, all these gangs were no longer cohesive and they fragmented and disintegrated to little factions and cliques divided by blocks and neighborhoods and whatnot without no rhyme or reason. So that's why you have the gangs that you have today as far as the black gangs go. And I stand by my statement that racism does play a part in this because the Italian gangs can move anywhere without any scrutiny or without being regulated. Not so much with the black gangs because they're just limited just to their own neighborhoods or ghettos. And we ain't gonna count the gangs that pretty much spread out to other ghettos because that's the same thing. It wasn't like, so and so started the Bloods and now the Bloods are in politics and now they're running unions and whatnot. It's not like that with that type of gang. But I just want to make this video to pretty much clarify and add my 2 cents into the conversation. So audience, tell me what you think. Let me know in the comment box. This is Iron Will Media.